We want blood. We want blood. We want blood. Terry, 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 Terry. And then Philadelphia got blood in the form of Dustin Rhodes bleeding, Mick Foley's Cactus Jack bleeding, and I'm certain other people in the audience were bleeding because Kevin Sullivan, Cactus Jack, and the Nasty Boys said, we're going to take trash cans, chairs, bash each other, bash the fans, we're going to bash everybody, and we want blood. Oh, Philadelphia, what were you like? What are you like, considering you're still around? This is during the rise of ECW, but still, you're still around in Philadelphia. Why do you love blood so goddamn much? These are important questions, none of which will be answered in the following video. I'm Charles Renton with the retro view of WCW Slamboree 1994, a Legends reunion. Boy, I'm sure all the legends that were at this show really appreciated seeing that hardcore street fight. Baba Booey, Baba Booey, Baba Booey, the broad bully street fight. WCW is in a strange state of flux at this point because they had cut costs. Eric Bischoff had cut costs. They were doing better on pay-per-view, and Hulk Hogan was about to be there, but Hogan wasn't there yet. They still had the Clash of Champions, and then he would be there, for Bash at the Beach 1994. That would be very successful for them. But part of the reason, by the way, that I'm doing these random just retro reviews is I'm going to be doing some more stuff like this in WWE events, maybe some ECW pay-per-views and whatever else I can find, because honestly, the current wrestling product has kind of soured me on wrestling. I need to be reminded of why I love wrestling, because even though I love some of the wrestlers today, that's why I'm doing these random ones. That's why I've done retro reviews for the past number of years, especially the past 5 or so. This, however, wasn't one of the best WCW offerings. There were moments where the crowd was really goddamn electric, which is amazing because the Philadelphia Civic Center, that was closed down 2 years after this, had 4,000 fans in a building that holds anywhere from about 9,500 to 15,000 people. So even if you just used half the arena, that is 7,500. I mean, the okay, between what, like 5,000 and 7,500 or something like that. The whole point is, the crowd that was there did get up for some of the moments, but there were times they were just sitting on their goddamn hands. And also, the legends. I mean, the dark match, by the way, was pretty wonderful. Paul Orndorff and Paul Roma against the Armstrongs. Brad and Brian Armstrong. Yes, the future Road Dogg was on a WCW pay-per-view. Yeah, that's stupid motherfucker, but I could get into that if I want to. But no, let's be positive. Sheik, always positive. Sheik, not the original Sheik, and the Iron Sheik were not on this show. Well, Mean Gene welcomes the legends. Now, here's who they are quickly. Ole Anderson, the assassin. Jody Hamilton, I believe. You could recognize the protruding neck. Penny Banner, who I'm not that familiar with. Red Bastien, Tully Blanchard, The Crusher, Don Curtis, Terry Funk, who didn't show up because Terry Funk would appear a little bit later on. Vern Gagne, Hard-Boiled Haggerty. No, really, that was his name. That's not a joke. Larry the Axe Henning, Killer Kowalski, Ernie Ladd, Wahoo McDaniel, Angela Mosca, Harley Race, Ray Stevens with very dyed hair. Good goddamn Christ. Hair Club for Crippler Men. I mean, really, take a look at that. Lou Thez, Johnny Weaver, Mr. Wrestling 2, and Tommy Young, who is one of the best referees of all time, whose career was cut short. It was in '89. I don't remember the match, but I know he took a tumble outside and broke his neck, and he ended up not being able to do refereeing again, which is a shame because he really was one of the best referees. Shivani and Heenan welcome us. Ventura was not on the call. Ventura would call a match later, but he would mostly be backstage. He would not last much longer after this. I think he was gone by the time the June Clash came up because of the friction with Hogan. And for good, bad, or indifferent, I mean, Hogan was coming in. Ventura, who was pretty good when he came to WCW initially at Super Brawl 2, by this point, it was obvious that it wasn't working out. I mean, he had been there just over 2 years. And even if him and Hogan could have coexisted, would Jesse Ventura really have meant much of anything to the WCW bottom line in 94 into 95. Imagine if Ventura had been able to coexist with Hogan and vice versa. He could have been on Nitro. That would have been interesting. So, here's Commissioner Nick Bockwinkel, one of the all-time great world champions. He talks about how the International Heavyweight Championship is going to be given back to Sting because of the match in Japan where Rick Rude actually suffered the career-ending back injury. I say career-ending because he actually was preparing for a comeback, but then that Lloyd's of London insurance policy, they wanted it to be paid back if he was going to come back to wrestle. Yeah. That being said, Sting says, I want to earn it in the ring. I'll face Vader. Because Sting has always had success against Vader. Actually, he's done pretty well. He's gotten the shit beat out of him, but he beat him in the King of Cable's final. The King of Cable finals. That's easy for me to say. That was at Starrcade 92. One of my favorite matches, and I still don't know what the hell the King of Cable finals King of Cable tournament was. It was dumb. The bell rings with 13 minutes into the show for the first match, which is Stunning Steve Austin against Johnny B. Bad. A precursor of the King of the Ring 96 match, where Austin would get his lip busted, and then fortunately they were right across the way from a hospital, and he got stitched up and came back. U.S. title match. Austin was great in WCW. Stunning Steve Austin, he really was great. And Mark Merrill wasn't bad. I mean, he was bad because he was Johnny B. Bad, but he wasn't bad in the ring. The thing is, he couldn't have really a long match. It's not that he wasn't a good athlete, but it was the gimmick, it was the style. This was decent. ECW fans in the front row, like the Straw Hat guy. And then later, there was a flummox on a 2 count, but the bell rang and the fans booed. Good job there, timekeeper. And then belly to back, and Austin rolled on top, 1, 2, 3. The one thing about WCW that I noticed, especially after Turner bought it, they didn't know how to do finishes all that well. Especially once, the messages of, Crockett left. They didn't know how to do finishes very well. I mean, I wasn't advocating at this point for Johnny B. Bad to win the U.S. title, but it was just very odd. So anyway, Mean Gene's with Ernie Ladd and Wahoo McDaniel. We talk about dyed hair, good lord. It's funny, look up what Ernie Ladd said about Wahoo McDaniel and know the history there. I'm not going to repeat it here, but it's something I guess you couldn't say on television, but I'm not going to say it here. But man, Ernie Ladd was a great promo. And Dusty's in Hollywood in front of a green screen, making major motion pictures and sitcoms, baby. And Terry Funk and Tully Blanchard had a Legends match, and Gordon Soley was on the call with Heenan. There were ECW chants because Terry Funk had made appearances in ECW. And this was one of the last big moments that Tully Blanchard had in the ring until he went to AEW and took bumps for some reason. Jump start, and it was a brawl. Terry was insane. He misses the moonsault, a ref bump. The ref gets tossed around, and it's a double DQ. I don't really have anything else to say there. It was 8 minutes. It was fine. Tully didn't want to do a job. Terry was like, I don't care. I'll beat him. I don't like Joe Blanchard. Oh, good old Terry Funk. His 79th birthday was celebrated recently. And man, I don't know how Terry Funk is still alive with all the shit he did. I'm glad he is. I just don't know how the fuck he's still alive. Jesse Ventura is backstage. Jesse Ventura is still alive. He's talking about Ric Flair and Colonel Rob. Talks to Ric Flair, and then Ric Flair brings up Colonel Rob Parker. Who does Rob Parker have in his side pocket that's going to face Ric Flair for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship? But before we find that out, Larry Zbyszko took on Lord Steven Regal. Larry Zbyszko had not been in the ring for about 18 months. It's a non-title match because Lord Steven Regal was the TV champion. Vlad, by the way, the African-American gentleman that has the glasses, that's always enthusiastic and always doing this and always just so energetic at the front row of any WWE or WCW pay-per-view event or even ECW. Why did they never show that documentary of him? I mean, release it on YouTube or something, please. The guy apparently is really nice. I'd sure love to hear about him and see that documentary. Man, he was enthusiastic. Anyway, so it was well worked. Regal was so good as a heel, and Larry still being over, and then would really get over with the New World Odor, line that he would start saying, and then driving into the fucking ground, and still would be over. Later, he got a double arm takeover and got the victory over the TV champion. I don't remember this going anywhere necessarily, but I know Larry's around WCW for a while. Mean Gene interviews Terry Funk, who talks about Philly, and I'm hardcore. And then I realized I sounded more like Mick Foley impersonating Terry Funk there, but he said that egg-sucking dog Dusty Rhodes. Well, that's a callback there. And this was good. Terry's like, you haven't seen the last of me. WCW Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Gordon Solie hosts. Lou Thez hands out the plaques and smashes people over the head. I would have loved to have seen Lou Thez at the state of his career do that. Well, state of his life, because he hadn't been wrestling for a while. Harley Race, the Crusher, Ernie Ladd, the Assassin, Ole Anderson, Dick the Bruiser, his daughter accepted. And this is cool. This is nice to see. Ernie Ladd, I don't know how Ernie Ladd wrestled into like almost his 50s with his knees being shot from football, being 6'9" and covering the ground that he walks on. But there we go. It was a good ceremony. Went a bit long, but you know what? It was nice that they got their just due. And 93, 94, 95, I don't think they did the Legends ceremony thing at the 96 Slamboree. If they did, it was off the pay-per-view. And Jesse Ventura interviews Curl and Rob Parker. Hey, tell me who Ric Flair is going to face. What do you mean you're not going to tell me? Well, we find out after this match, which was Dustin Rhodes against Bunkhouse Buck. With Colonel Rob Parker, it's a bull rope match. Now, it wasn't dull. There were good moments, but it also dragged. These matches are hard to do. The crowd was at times into it. They did chant, "We want blood," an awful lot. And then we got, at one point, Dustin had the shirt over his head. And Bobby Heenan, of course. Come on, Dustin, give him the shirt off your back. Because Bobby Heenan just didn't give a fuck, and he could get away with that shit. And the ref was knocked down at one point. I did note this keeps going. Colonel Rob Parker got knocked down, and we got a bell shot. Cowbell shot 1, 2, 3, because they had a fever, and the only prescription was more cowbell to the head. And that was about it right there. It was all right. And then here's Terry Funk, and he hits Dustin with a branding iron, and it's supposed to be a hot branding iron, so that's why Dustin instantly starts bleeding like he's a grape being squished. I don't think grapes bleed, but I'm just going to roll with it. And Dustin was bleeding a ton, actually. There was a lot of blood on the mat. And then officials come out to stop it, and Terry chants. And then Heenan leaves to see what Terry Funk is up to. And I think that was by design, because Heenan probably didn't want to call the next match. But first, Mean Gene brings out Ray Stevens and Red Bastien. Red Bastien's glorious mustache. I assume Red Bastien passed away, but man, I hope that mustache didn't prevent him from getting in a coffin. So, I don't know why that was my first thought. Jesse Ventura joins commentary for Flair vs. Wyndham, WCW World Title match. And actually, I take that back. Heenan probably didn't want to call the next match, or the next match after this. Colonel Rob Parker was in Wyndham's corner, and Flair didn't know he was going to face Barry Windham, and he got to face Barry Windham. Barry Windham about 40 pounds heavier than Flair faced before. Barry was even bigger than he was in 1993. I mean, good grief. And, everybody in that family gets big and gains weight and has issues. But it's no wonder that Barry was having a lot of knee problems by 93, 94 and such, because of all the extra weight and all the mileage and stuff like that. They've had many classic matches, and this had elements, but it just wasn't great. Flair bumped around like a Super Bowl. There was a nice superplex spot. The figure four ropes again. The spill outside. Sherry was in the corner. Sherry's in the front row. God, Sherry always looked great. Wyndham hurt his knee during this match because he would drop out of wrestling for another 2 years before he came back as the Stalker in WWE. No, Vince found out he liked to hunt and put him in camo face paint. Vince McMahon was an idiot. Pretty much still is, but he always knew how to draw money, somehow. Despite his worst instincts. Flair would eventually end up hitting the crossbody and retaining the championship. Again, not a terrible match, but not a great match. And then we get Bash at the Beach 94 plug. Nothing of note happening except Flair versus Hogan. You know, the match should have happened at WrestleMania 8, but didn't because that doesn't work for me, brother. I guarantee it was that Hogan didn't want to do the job. Mean Gene's with Don Curtis and the Crusher. Don Curtis, I believe was it Dottie? Dottie Curtis? That was on the most recent, or one of the most recent Dark Side of the Ring episodes on the Graham family. I think it was his widow. Nevertheless, Crusher was there. And then Dave the Hammer Schultz, former Philadelphia Flyer, was going to be the referee for the following match, Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan against the Nasty Boys. It's a Broad Street Bully Tag Team Championship match. And yeah, just take weapons and hit each other with the furniture for 10 minutes, and then there you go. That's it. I mean, the crowd loved it. It wasn't the worst thing I've seen, but the problem is even looking back at this stuff, and this was pretty wild for 94, especially for WCW. The thing is after seeing so much stuff in, current time, this still just blends together. I mean, these guys took it a little more seriously, but Cactus Jack was bleeding. They didn't really care. The commentary was laughing throughout. I wonder why Foley had to retire less than 6 years after this, at least full time. I wonder. A table shatters, we get an elbow with no cover, and then the hockey stick gets involved, and then Jerry Sags gets beaten up by Dave Schultz. And then we get a hockey stick shot. 1, 2, 3, new tag team champions. I believe Sullivan and Cactus Jack dropped them to Pretty Wonderful at Bash at the Beach 94. I'd have to go check on the results, but I'm not going to because I really don't feel like, fact-checking myself. But I believe it was, and then Foley would leave WCW shortly after this. Max Payne then comes down and hits a guitar shot to Sags, and then Sags is all covered and stuff. Dave Sullivan hits in a cast, in a foot cast or leg cast, hits Knobs with a crutch because everybody had to get beat up. The Nasty Boys were remarkably around for a while despite not really being able to wrestle. So anyway, Sags was KO'd in the ring. So Mean Gene killed time with Vern Gagne and Lou Thesz. Oh, you want to talk about the history here? Pretty much because the NWA didn't want to have Lou Thesz drop the title to Vern Gagne, the AWA was created. Congratulations, NWA. You played yourself. Vern did not sound like he knew where the hell he was, and this was 1994. Lou Thesz was more with it. Anyway, Sting versus Vader for the WCW Internationalist Heavyweight Championship. I may have said that wrong, but he has the vacant championship because Sting said, well, Rude fucked up his back. He didn't say that, so I'll face Vader. The guy I'd beaten once on pay-per-view. These two always work well together because Sting could take Vader's punishment. He could make it believable when he fired back, and Vader could sell well for a monster while being dominant. And rib targeting the knee. Sting would come back with his own flurries. We get a ref bump, a one-arm choke slam, beautifully done. Sting went up for it. Vader was super strong at this point. No count because the ref's down. Harley gets involved and hits a fairly weak chair shot to Vader. I mean, Harley was not really apt with swinging chairs, I imagine. I mean, not that he wasn't tough, but he probably maybe didn't want to crown Vader at that point. Probably wanted to err on the safe side. We get a DDT for 2. Then we get a sloppy finish here because Harley's trying to motivate Vader. He gets back in the ring. Vader catches Sting, slams him, misses the moonsault. Harley gets up and does a diving headbutt, but hits Vader. The referee shoves Harley out, and then Sting hits a splash. 1, 2, 3. They didn't know how to do finishes properly in WCW, and that I realized was a recurring theme looking back at some of these pay-per-views. That being said, I'll say that, the upper card of the show mostly delivered. It wasn't an awful pay-per-view, but it also showed that WCW needed to bring in the former WWE talents to give them a boost. So fans would turn and say, hey, they actually have some really great stars. They just need more people to watch because of mismanagement and bullshit. But nevertheless, a Legends reunion. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.